So where do we begin? Well, normally I talk about placement, proportions, and perspective. With this one, I'm going to start with perspective because the most difficult aspect of this particular scene is getting our roof, which is what I'm going to convey as being a sort of Heath Robinson affair. It's well made, of course, but you can see it is not symmetrical. It's more of a sort of like what you'd find on a barn, and it's in a state of decay, which is very fascinating for watercolorists. It always works well, you'll see. If you've ever wondered, is it a good idea to paint something that's broken, decaying, rusty, all of those things work. So this is perfect for that. And the reason being, I'm guessing, is because in watercolors is a way of positively charging something that we might otherwise perceive as, you know, kind of negative. We see things which are breaking down as negative, but when they're conveyed in color with a beautiful medium like watercolor, it gives something extra to it. So I'm going to say there that watercolors is one of those mediums. There's many mediums which can do this, but watercolors exceptionally good at doing this. It can make something which we might consider ugly, for want of a better way to describe it, and turn it into something gorgeous. So that's a really positive sort of magical thing to do. So let's start then with perspective, and I'm going to start with that ridge line on the roof. So when I look at this ridge line, immediately I'm thinking of the moment on the clock. So that's about 14 minutes past the hour, could be 13. It's very close to one of those moments, and it's in the top third of your page. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I was to measure this page here once, twice, 3 times, then I'm going to start that roof there as 14 minutes past the hour or 13 minutes past the hour, 1/3 of the way down from the left-hand side. So that's my first line. You see how I did that? And then I just look at it and compare left and right. That's my way to think about both the placement, the perspective, and also proportionally, we're kind of in the right ballpark. Now I'm thinking maybe it's closer to 14 than 13. So I'll bring it down just a little bit, and then I'm happier with that one. So that's my first mark. Now, of course, as I've mentioned many times, sometimes it can change. Things can change as you get more information on your page, and expect that as an artist. Don't necessarily accept the first thing that you might convey. It could well be perfect, but it's likely it will be necessary to change it, review it, improve it. So we're always about improvement. So what am I doing now? Well, I'm just kind of thinking about a sort of thirds going this way. So I've turned it into almost like, like the French flag. I've split it into 3. 1, 2, 3. And that's going to give me my plumb line. If I get the third on the right, so this line here going down, you can see what it's doing. It's automatically giving me my plumb line. For the apex of that roof. So that's good, I think. And then there's another kind of bonus, but I'll come to that in a moment, because the other third, which I haven't drawn yet, sort of conveys almost the end of the pitch of the roof. But before I get there, I'm going to now do my best to take you through these diagonal lines. So I'm going to start with this one. So this comes down pretty much halfway. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I use a blue line now, let's say if I was to cut a line through the center of my page, like so. I know it gets a bit confusing, so I'm doing this one in blue. So that's halfway. And I find the halfway point on my page like this. And I'm just going to draw a little line there. I'm using a bit of geometry here. I'm afraid sometimes I have to do that just to get it close. And then I can put that little angle coming down from the top of the roof there down to the shoulder of that extra piece of roof that's been added on. So what's that as a moment on the clock? Well, if that was 20 past, which I think it is, this is further along. So I'm thinking maybe 23 minutes past the hour, something like that. What's really important is not necessarily the time on the clock. It's getting closer to that angle. So I think that's actually not too bad. Okay. And you could also think about it. It's like a sail on a little dinghy boat, you know, it's just like that sort of sail, like an isosceles triangle. Good. If you've got that, then well done, because now we're going to move along to our next measurement. Now, just to go back a little bit to where I was talking about the French flag, I'm going to put a third coming this way. There we are. And now I'm going to move downwards. Now, this is not quite a third, but if I was to find something that measures 3 times again, once, twice, 3 times, something like that, and then perhaps just go up a little bit, that's good, because now I can help you to get the next line. Now, this one's quite tricky, so I'm going to cheat by doing just one line to begin with, straight from there to there, a diagonal line. You see that? Straight from there to there. This is the easiest way to do it. So you literally, from the top there to here, just create a straight line. Okay? Good. That was really easy. It's not correct, of course. We've got to change it a little bit, but for now, it's going to help, because what that will do is it will allow us to find this point here to go across. And what do you think? It's not quite quarter past, sorry, or quarter to even. I'm going to say that this is very close to 16 minutes to the hour. 16 minutes to the hour. So I'm going to just bring that there. So you can see now I'm sort of conveying that side of the roof there that we're seeing, which is great because we're moving along nicely at a pleasant pace, not too fast, I hope, not too slow, but you'll be the judge of that. And that means now I can either put in the sort of bent leg of, it's like a dog's bent leg, isn't it? Or I could put on the angle over here that's sort of added on, you know. In England, in Italy, this is like a lean-to they've stuck on the side of the hut or barn. Well, before I draw that line though, I can tell what time it is on the clock. I really need to work out its relationship with the opposite side. What am I talking about? Well, this corner here, you see that little corner there? That's the end of that roof. And that corner there is the end of that roof. Now, if I was to put a line horizontally through that point, going straight across, and that's not doing very well, am I? It's already going on a tilt. There we go. That's supposed to be horizontal. What I'm hoping to show you is that it's slightly, this side here is slightly higher up on the picture plane, just fractionally, than this piece here. So if I was to take a line going straight across like that, if I go up just a little fraction, there it is. I'm happier now, because that will give me the perspective. Now, there are formulas for getting perspectives absolutely perfect, but they absolutely kill the life out of watercolor. And you'll probably be glad to know I'm not going to push you down that avenue today, because it's going to be fun to just do it by eye. But it is a good practice just to check as a reference this height compared to that one. This one is slightly lower down on the left, and this one obviously is slightly higher up on the right. That's all we need to know. If you can get that, well done. And then we can move back to this point up here, but I'll give you a moment because that might take some time. And I will also mention, there is no rule which says that you cannot use a ruler. There is no rule that says that. And I know many artists, you know, and some of them are professional, who use set squares, compasses, you know, all the technical drawing tools. They use them all, because why wouldn't you? It just makes life easier. I'm absolutely certain that if for whatever reason they didn't have their tools, they could do it by eye. Eventually it'd take them a bit longer. Yeah. But then if you've got a ruler and you prefer to use it, then please feel free. It's not cheating or anything like that. I mean, it's no more cheating than using a pencil instead of, you know, a piece of charcoal. It's not cheating. It's just utilizing technology. Because at the end of the day, you have to draw it. It's you. The pencil doesn't do it. The ruler does not do it. But anyway, that's just my thought. So up here, I have this articulation just there. That's where the change of direction really is. Now I've taken an abbreviated tilt going straight across like so. And to be fair, if I wanted to now, I know that this is slightly lower than that line. So I could guesstimate it by putting a line or a dot there somewhere. But I have another method that could help you. And here we go. I'll show you now. So if you were to continue this tilt, remember this tilt here going from the little added on roof, and you continue across diagonally. Do you see what I'm going to get at here? It's very close to there. Very close indeed. So I'm using geometry again. I'm just going to point this in the same direction. And then remember what I said, it's very close, but a little bit lower. There it is. I'm just going to make it up, but I've got something to base it on, a little bit of help. And then I can use that point to go to there. And that's what gives me that sort of dog's leg, bent leg of an angle on that roof. And then I look at it and I think, does that really express what I wanted? And you know, it's likely that you might want to change it. So please feel free, trust your instinct. And I think, oh, actually, I just want to go a bit further than that. I want to really sort of make the eye understand that that roof is. I can imagine a guy and probably his son with a dungaree and a Ford Model T car and hammer and nail banging that roof. I can imagine those people making it. And that's more like what I would imagine rather than what I first drew. And that's how I do it. I sort of imagine and I think, yeah, that will work. And if it doesn't feel like it's going to work, I'll try it again. I'm not going to settle until at least I've had another go. So there we are. So there we are. We've done quite a bit there. We've used perspective. We've used placement and proportion. Yeah, this is bigger than that piece of paper over there. So expect there to be some proportional differences. But on the whole, this is looking quite close And then I make a decision. Am I going to make this just a bit smaller so I've got more foreground? I like the weeds growing in front, gives you more of a feeling of the decay that it's been left maybe for at least a couple of years. And I like the way those weeds are sort of occupying the bright spaces. So yeah, I'm going to give some space for that. Just change that roof a little bit. I'm moving it upwards a bit more. And this is ordinarily the way to go. You can change things as you develop it, and we shouldn't be shy of considering the options as we progress through the drawing. Okay, so do not get precious. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't get precious about anything you've drawn so far. Right, well, that's bringing us on nicely to where we need to go. Now, notice I use a brush, bigger brush, flat brush, just to get rid of the eraser burrs. That is very essential because otherwise you're tempted to use your hands. I've been out in the garden today, don't know about you, but and I was barbecuing, so I've probably got oily fingers. I don't want to smudge my paper. And the brush actually is a better way of doing it all round. Okay, so hope that's helped you to assemble your roof. And now we're going to move lower into the cabin itself. So I'm going to clear off all of those drawings. I will be looking at your drawing later, of course, you know that. But let's first of all establish the next vertical lines which hold the roof up. So, well, it has a bit of a lean to it, the whole thing. There's a little bit of a gentle lean that way, maybe. That's fine. I like that. And if I see a little bit of a lean, I'll put it in. I won't exaggerate it too much, but of course, it's possible you could. And looking at the line over here, it's just a bit further to the right than the corner of the roof there, just a little bit to the left. And there we go. We've got a nice feel. Now, I'm going to alert your eye to the foundation of the building. It's tricky to see, I have to say, but somebody at some point, maybe last year, has trimmed around it because you can just about see the line there. It's not so overgrown after all. And I see a tilt there. That's what I'm seeing. And I'm going to put it in because that will give me somewhere to base the green areas and the weeds to grow. And the reason I want to put this in is so that I know the perspective of this building, at least on this gable end. So it's kind of going away from me upwards to the right. And it's not quite quarter past, is it? It's not quite 14 minutes past either. It's very close between the two. And I do this one very faint. This one, I draw it in and then I'll use this is a kneadable eraser. And I just pat it a little bit so that I can barely see it, but at least I can. And there it is. So there's the sort of line. And then what I would do is I would now start to look at the next biggest shapes. Of course, some artists would draw the windows, the doors, the little sign, the garage door, for example. That's absolutely fine to do that. But my teaching is that I go to the next biggest shape and then I'll come back, because having an instinct that this is right is one thing, but that being correct, I won't know really until I've drawn the things around it. So that's the logic to my method, if there is any. And so I'm going to stick with that. But of course, there are no rules. There's just principles. So it's up to you Now I'm going to look at this tree, or big shrub, or whatever that is, it's growing there behind, and I'm just going to make it as one shape, and it's sort of sitting up there near the apex, a little bit further back, and goes up. I can't actually see where it ends. It's off the photograph, which is good because I can see where it comes back down. And this is the important thing that artists need to learn to do. When we're out painting a scene, when you've got several different greens in the background, you know, there's trees, there's bushes, there's all sorts of weeds, and it can become incredibly confusing. So what we must do is try to bring sense and order to this, at least enough sense and order, because it's wild, it's growing as it should. But if we can establish boundaries to where this tree is compared to the next one, then as we paint through, it's like reading a story. We know where things are and we see a logic. Okay, so I see that big group there and it kind of ends down there. That's what I think, at least. So I can kind of intimate that idea. And now I'm ready for the next big group of trees. Now, sometimes the expression can't see the wood for the trees. It's pretty apt. Sometimes it's hard to know where trees end because you see through trees and you see things from behind the tree. But I just simplify, always simplifying, because I just need to know that this is a group of trees. This could be another tree that's in front. It could well be. I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't there. It looks like it's possible, but it could also be part of that tree. But what I do notice is this shadow seems to cut across the roof from that group of trees, or that tree at least. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify. I am going to bring this up from the top left corner somewhere down to, remember the French flag idea? It's that third there again. It seems to want to curve downwards and almost join to that point. If you look at the photograph, that's what I'm sort of, the eye is following to that corner. And I think that's good because it gives a hidden element to the composition. This line continues down. If it was like a waterfall, it would just cascade down and joins this line, which it has a certain energy to it, which is very useful. So that's good. So I'm going to group that tree there. What's the next big shape? Well, it could well be now the shadow on that roof side. And that's what I would call, excuse me, a mixture of three different edge qualities. It has got hard edge, it's got soft edge, because, you know, shadows, as they come through the tree, they sort of move a little bit. And it's also got broken edge, where you kind of see little bits of light, little bits of shadow. So that's confusing. So what do you do when you are faced with something that confuses? Again, we must simplify it, and we see it either as one big shape that's unified and then work from there, or we break it into parts of shape. So here's a couple of suggestions to deal with the shadow. You could start off by imagining it's a cloud, which isn't too bad because it is light from the sky coming through after all. And you could just draw a big circular form like a cloud, like that. Very basic, like a child might draw, which is fine because, you know, as Picasso said, he spent his whole life devoting his art to try to learn to paint and draw with the abandon of a child. And I believe he meant it, you know. But he is the same guy who said something to the effect of, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So we know his morals were a little bit askew. But I think that's a good idea. And another thing that you can do once you've got that sort of basic shape there is you can then simplify that yet again into two shapes. So there's one, and then there's two shapes. So you see that the first map can be now divided into two. And this is another relevant way to work because it just simplifies things. Now, I am not trying to pretend that these two sort of cloud shapes look anything like what we're seeing. But what it does show us is where those masses sit on that roof. And I've now got a better idea of where the light and the darks occupy that roof. Everything else then becomes brushwork. So, haha, we free ourselves. And now, like the child, we can just move on because that's all we need to do. Problem over for now. Um, so I hope that helps you with that. Now, don't worry, if you don't like that idea and you prefer to draw all the little, broken edges, you can do, of course. And once upon a time, I used to do the same. It's a learning curve, art is, and we have to find a way that works. Now, before I go to the next big shape, which probably is the barn doors at this point, I'd like to bring your attention to the curve in this roof. You see, it does sag a little bit. Gravity takes hold of all of us in the end. But it's not a bad thing in this case because that just looks a little bit too straight. So I just want to change that to curve it a little bit while I can. Now, I think the sag sort of goes below the straight line. That's how I interpret it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just going to make it sag a little bit. And it may not be the most important thing, but sometimes you just get the urge to change it as you go. And that's another thing that I wanted to mention. Feel free to add things when you see it that you might forget otherwise. Okay, so hope that's helping you get to this stage. The next big shape, I think, is that barn door in the center. It's pretty big. So what's that? There is a lintel across the top, and then the two sides, I love how they sort of tilt in, they sort of lean. There we go. You can imagine on a windy, wintry night, this thing would be creaking. And all of that creaking over the years has made that lean. I don't think they would have built it like that. It's happened that way now, but originally that would have been probably perfectly straight. And if I look at that lintel that's in the center, it is very level, actually, isn't it? It's anything that is. So I'm just going to put a straight level line. I'm going to guesstimate this now where it sort of sits. So please feel free to be kind of organic about that if you wish. But if you want to take some kind of reference from here, like a register point, that little, the bent dog's leg there, the knee of the dog, that is in line, but this is slightly to the left. So now as I put this tilt, which I feel is about 28, 29 minutes past the hour. I love how it tilts. It's amazing. The other one's straight. The other one seems straight, and it's almost below the apex line, but not quite. It's slightly over to the right, just a bit, and then it's straight down. This one is, for whatever reasons, this one's straight. So if anything, the hut's kind of leaning that way a little bit, maybe. And as I put that in, I think, well, actually, maybe I'm getting it a bit too big now. So I might just bring it down fractionally. But the shape's okay. It's just a bit too big. So I just bring it in. So I'm also thinking about my proportions. my placements are really this week, because it is a building, it's all really governed by perspective. I'm thinking about perspective first this week, which is not my usual way of working, I know. So there we are. So far we have a hut with a rounded shadow thing sitting on its roof. We've got two trees, one in the background on the left, one on the right. And now I'm ready to come forward into the foreground, perhaps, to put some of these weed shapes. So, yeah, I know it's very tempting to draw the window or the other. Oh, there is another barn door. Yeah, we could draw. Actually, that is the next big shape. So the other barn door, I just put that in. That's sort of tilting down away from us to the right. That's not too difficult. Just add that in like so. But the next big shape is definitely this group of weeds here. And when I'm drawing these sort of weed shapes, I'm thinking about how I'm going to interpret this with my brush. So the drawing becomes a map for where my brush will go. The brush itself will determine all of the textures. All I need, therefore, in my drawing is that it looks like clouds again, sort of nebulous shapes, or mushrooms, if you prefer. They're like convex forms pushing upwards. That's kind of like weeds anyway, and they're all reaching skywards like so. And I'm going to let my brush describe this, as I will also allow my brush to describe this rounded shape I'm seeing here. So they're mounds, and this is an easier way to draw and paint weeds that can be very difficult, actually. I remember the struggle I had as a student artist many years ago now, but trying to draw and paint weeds, because there's so much detail involved within the grouping. So my advice is, as ever, simplify, just make it into a mound. And then we'll separate it into lights, darks, and of course the middle tones, which occupy most of the space anyway, you'll see. So what did I do there? Well, I'm just going to now draw a little bit of the grassy bank in front of the weeds there, as it sort of, it's not quite level, but it's probably the most level area, really, where those weeds are growing up. And again, I'm just using this as a map for where my textures will go. All right. So please don't think that's how it's going to be. But in a way, what I'm drawing is a cartoon. It is a cartoon, almost literally a cartoon. It looks like a cartoon in the Disney sense. And I'm going to add the detail with the brush. That's where the special effects will occur. So I hope that's helped you to draw out your hut, your space for your trees. I'm going to now put detail into this, some detail. So I'm going to clear off all of those guidelines, so they're going. And I'm going to now focus on the windows. So there is that little perfectly that is a perfectly designed window for this hut. You can see it, little cross window. And it wouldn't matter if you got it a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, as long as you don't go too big. It's more of a square, although it's slightly taller than wide. And then we've got the cross running through the center, just like that. And it doesn't need to be any more detailed than that, interestingly. And then over here we have, I'm not sure if there's some curtains or something there. That's quite haunted, that, actually. But the basic shape is a rectangle. Two of them sitting side by side. They're a little bit longer than that window there. And I'm just drawing the parameters. Again, I'm going to let paint do the rest. So as a watercolorist, it's our job really to find out what we need to put in and what we don't need to be bothered with, that we can either draw with paint or not bother to draw at all and just paint. So there is a clue. The clue is in that, because very often something that you could paint doesn't necessarily need to be drawn. I'm just going to put that little bit there in as well. There's another sort of cloud of a grouping of weeds coming in from the side there. So I'm going to give that some space to develop there. And the last thing that I'm going to do, remember that I put that line. It was just a little line running along there. Well, now I'm going to remove that and show you that there's groups or waves of weeds pushing here and there along that line. They really do look like little waves. So I'm going to do that now. And that's where my line was, remember? So that's what I'm going to, it's like putting clothes on a washing line. That washing line is where all of these little weeds are going to sort of grow out from it. And in a way, this is sort of like the middle ground, and this will be the foreground. So I'm also now developing not just boundaries, but these are what some watercolorists term as action lines. So that's good to know as well. And I'll just put these little tentacles of, I don't know what kind of vines they are growing up there. There's some kind of, I'm going to put a little line like that. Again, I'm more interested in the shape of the vine than the textures just yet, because that's coming. I can paint that with a brush. I just need to know where I'm painting with the brush, if you see what I mean. Okay, well, it's astonishing, but we're almost there. I think up in the corner here, there's like a little hayloft or something. There's an open space. Do you see that? And I'm just going to draw that in. That's a nice detail. And it's almost a right angle, it just leans down a little bit. I don't know what's sitting in there. It looks like could be some wood drying, there's something in there. There's something definitely stored up there. And then the last detail that I'm going to draw is that roof that is open here. Do you see it? Where you can see kind of the little the laths going across. So that's a little bit of an area of focus. It's very interesting because it's got all the depth that we need. It's got lights, it's got mids, and it's got these sort of dark shapes. So my advice is draw the dark shapes, because the light shapes will take care of themselves. You'll see in the first wash. So as long as we know where the darks will go, and it's like three little rectangles. These two are the same because that's the space between the laths going up the roof. And this one is like the dark space where one of the planks that was attached is blown away, perhaps with the wind. So there it is. So I've got this little open area. Anything else that might be useful? Well, interestingly, depending on how you want to tackle this painting, some artists might just ignore the white lines on the roof. You see, it's like a tin I'm not sure if it's a tin construction on the roof there or something, but where the tin sort of meets or the wood meets, there's like these little lines. Now, they're light in the darks. You see what I mean? They're lighter lines in the shadow. But when we get to the lights, they're darker. Do you see that? And that's a nice contrast. So I'm going to start with the lines in the shadows first because it just seems logical. And to help you get the lines parallel, use your paintbrush or a knitting needle and get it in line with this edge here. That's the important one. And then slide it across, keeping it parallel. Do you see what I'm doing? And then I draw a line. Now, at the moment, this line is on its own. But as I start to put more in, you will see I'm trying to keep the spacing kind of similar. But as it goes away, what would happen in perspective? You know, it will get slightly closer as they go away. That's because those lines are converging slightly. You're going to get that effect. Now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that I can see on the screen. I might have put 7 in. No, I've only put 6 in. But anyway, I don't need to put too many in. But there is one line which seems to sort of bend. I'm going to just put it going that way. Now, remember, these lines are lighter in the actual photograph, aren't they? So just to remind you, if I clear those lines off, look where they are, and if they disappear, they're lighter. So when we come to paint this, of course, I want these lines to be quite light. So I use my putty eraser and I just erase them down so that I can just about see them. Hopefully it's enough for my memory to be kick-started and I'll go, oh yeah, that's got to be light. But the other way around this is you could use frisket, which is like you know, a stop out fluid, masking fluid. That's what I'm after, the word masking fluid. You can use masking fluid, but it's fussy, takes a long time, and it kills the you know, the moment of watercolor. So I don't bother with it. I just do, as you see, I just use my pencil and brush. Now, as I come out from the shadows, remember that's my shadow. This is the cloud for the shadow. I will then need some lines which will go in the lights, but they're darker, and that's the contrast. This is actually referred to in classical painting as the counter change. It does happen. It's a phenomena in nature. Now, whether you want to draw all of those in or you just paint them in, I leave that decision to you, but it wouldn't hurt if I just show you. You could quite easily just put some parallel lines going upwards. And again, as long as we remember, it's easier in the lights because these are going to be darks. It's these ones which will cause us some, well, they won't cause problems, but they could do if we don't pay attention. Okay, so hope that's helped you. We're pretty much there. The only other thing I can think of is a couple of these trees that are just branches and trunks, like that Y there. Usually it's like Y shapes, do you see, like that? And they're very easy to create. You don't even need to draw them. I put it in just to show you can put them in, but you could just as easily paint them later without even drawing them. Now, depending on your stylistic bent, I know we're all different here. Everyone's got a different element of how they want to draw things. If you see, I think it's ivy growing up there up the side of the building, that might be something that you like. I don't mind it at all. So I could just draw a little line going up like that, and I'll paint that in green. But it is tricky. That's a tricky one. And if you leave it out, your painting won't lose for it. That's all I'm trying to say. And then the last thing, very last thing, is the dark shape where the two old doors sort of nearly close. See what I mean? That sort of center of the barn door. It doesn't quite meet, does it? It's been opened so many times that it's no longer quite meeting. But it's an interesting shape, and that's what we want for watercolor. And if we can get that authentic little, do you see how it sort of, I mean, I haven't really drawn it exact, but it feels okay, because what's happening is it's as if the door's not quite in the jam, it's sort of leaning like it's been broken a little bit, which it has through time. So there we are. That is the drawing. Don't need anything more than that. Seriously, that will be absolutely enough. I may have missed things which you want to put in, like the sign. I'm sure there's a sign, do not, private or something here. There's a little sign. Some people love these little signs, and I'll be honest with you, in shows and things, when people put little signs or little chains and things like that, these are the ones that tend to sell. So there's obviously something about that. And also this here, this broken bit of the roof is another thing which will draw people to it. Seriously, that will. And definitely the counter change, because people will see it, may not even understand it. It's like magic. They'll see it and they'll feel, oh, this is nice painting. And they'll not even know why, but we will. So that's all. That's all we need for a watercolor. Just the action lines. And the last thing I'm going to do before I go into painting is I'm going to tape this out. So I tape it to my board or whatever I'm going to be using. But in the meantime, before I do that, we'll have a break for 5 or 10 minutes, but I'd like to see your drawing before we paint, if that's okay. So I'm going to pause the video there. Okay, so here is the value map. As you can see, it's quite an intricate value map. And sometimes value maps can become overly detailed. So this is one of those cases. So what I would urge you to do, rather than try to study where in those shadows the dark middle values and the dark accents are, and of course there's some middle values in there too, just in your mind's eye, think about this almost like a notan. Now, notans are literally just black and white. So it's the simplest cartoon idea we can get. So what I'd like you to think about is the roof is very light in the lights. You can see it's the brightest brights. So that area literally is, once we sort of nibble away at those edges of the leaves that are projected in the shadow, we really are looking at the white of the paper. It's that bright. It's the only place where we really have it that bright. Maybe in some of the flowers or the areas in the weeds down here, you might find, little sort of active areas of very light light. But if we were to actually just focus on the roof as our lightest light, that would be the best thing to do. And everything else will then be light middle value going to middle values. And then finally in the shadows, you'll have dark middle values because that's what usually happens. Shadows are denoted by dark middle values. And of course, the dark accent, like these little squares of black inside those windows. So it's going to be straightforward if we do it that way. The only bit on this which could present a problem is going back to that roof again, because it's quite a tricky little roof, as we found when we were drawing. But in the shadow, it's actually a middle value. Do you see that? Why is it that a middle value can then be a shadow? Well, it's to do with the surface it's being cast onto. This white roof, or very light metallic roof, reflects a lot of light, as you can see. So when a shadow actually casts upon it, it's only a middle value, really. It doesn't go very dark. You probably find by the tree here some dark middle values, but that's it. But those lines are light middle values. Oh no, that's tricky. So what we have to do is we'll paint that shadow on the roof as a sequence of washes. Of course, we'll have a very light wash, maybe, and then a light middle value, which will be the white lines that we see on the roof, or the light lines, and then a middle value. And then only towards the edge by the tree does it get a little bit darker. So that's how I'm going to treat it. But if you sort of have a look at the noisy area of the shadow on the tree, on the roof, sorry, here, you can see how as it edges out to the light, it gets more light because we are getting bounce light from the sky above hitting the shadow. So what happens is at the edge of the shadow, look here, that's a perfect example. It's a light middle value. So there we are. That's really how the value map can help us. So we're going to begin the painting now. So I'll share the other screen. I will keep the value map, although quite small. You can see I'm compressing it down up there, and I'll share the other screens with you now, if that's okay. And do you know what? It's a very good idea. I always think if you've got the value map, which we do, every now and then when you're painting color, just to have a look at the value map and then look straight at the color version. So it's good practice. As you can see, I put the two shacks on the screen for you there. And you can see, if you look from one to the other, how beautiful the colors are in the colored version. It's really glowing. So with that in mind, let's get painting. So I've wet my paints up. You'll need a little bit of paper towel or cloth or something in your hand, just in case. Or I will at least. Now, everything's going to get a little bit of a wash to begin with. I do have some blue in the sky up here, so there'll be a little bit of light blue, but mostly yellows and bits of orange. So if you follow along with me, I think we'll be okay. I'm going to start with a little bit of tea wash blue, and I'm just going to put it in up there. Do you see that? Where I see a little bit of that sky blue and a little bit up here by the fork of that Y-shaped tree. So this is how I'm going to do it. Just picking up my primaries and going along. So there's yellow, tea wash yellow. Where do I see that yellow? Well, I see a little bit of it up here, actually, and I'll let it sort of feed its way in. It doesn't bother me if it touches the blue a little bit and goes green, that's fine. And then I'll have some yellow up here a little bit, down here a little bit. I do see quite a bit of yellow actually in the lights down here. So you'll probably notice as I put these sort of, I'm going to call them colonies of weeds. They're little clumps of weed. I'll just have fun using my brush. You see that? I tend to let the brush become quite splayed by pushing it down like that. and just let that create textures as I go. I know at this stage, it's actually not going to be a problem. And
John,
yeah.
may I ask what yellow you're using?
Oh, sorry, cadmium yellow. But lemon yellow will do, any yellow will do, but this is cadmium yellow. It's what I've got in the set. And now, while it's still wet, I'll add a little bit of green to that. Now, I have a sap green here. If you don't have sap green, don't worry. You could use yellow ochre and viridian. They will make the same. And I'm adding yellow to the green, and I'm just going to let it punctuate into the green, but with textures. So wherever I see these light yellow greens, that's where I'm going. So that's my sap green, and it's still quite light. Tea, no strong, not any stronger than coffee really. And I'm allowing the greens to react with the yellows, touching them in to the yellow, and just enjoying really playing with those light values. It doesn't last long because we're going to move straight into the next color. But while we're there, we may as well just go with it. The next color will be orange. So I know we had yellow with green here. So I'm going to put yellow down here. And then I'm going to add orange to that. So I've got orange. If you don't have orange, just add yellow to your red or red to your yellow. And now I'm going to put some orange, because I can sort of see a sort of autumnal looking plant over here. It's got lots of orange. I'm going to let that happen. And there's actually a bit of orange down here on this, you know, this colony of weeds here. It's got a sort of an orangey shadow over here. And this one here also has a little bit of that orangey note. So I'm trying to be as specific as I can. Anywhere else where I'm seeing a bit of orange? Well, actually, I do see a little bit of orange here and there on that roof. Just down here, mostly. And then I'm going to go straight in to my light middle value greens. So what's that about? Well, if I take my sap green or any warm green really, so if you've got a green and it's very cool, add a bit of maybe burnt sienna to it, but I've got sap green, so that's perfect really. And I'm going to add a tiny touch of Payne's grey to it. Oh, well, that Payne's grey was actually wasn't Payne's grey. It's by the look of that, that's neutral tint, but it doesn't matter. It's just gone a bit darker. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to now put this. It is a tea wash, and this green is more, I guess, a grayer green. But again, you see how I'm allowing some light to play on the edges. That's fine. And then also I'll bring that. Remember, there's a curve here coming through. I'll bring some of this green into those oranges and yellows that I've created. I let these colors play. Let them play. It's really important to let watercolors play. Some watercolor artists say, be playful with your watercolors. This is what they mean. And as I come across here now there's a tree between these two yellowish notes, which is more of this green, grey-green. So I just play again. I allow textures to occur even at this stage. Do I see any more? Not really, but now as I move down to this side of the cabin on the right, I see the trees. Remember this big shape that we had that goes around to here and down there. So I'm using sangfui is what the Japanese call this kind of dry brush, where you use the side of the brush It's a sumi painting technique, but it's really good for bringing tree shapes together. And what I tried to think of as I'm doing that stroke is I'm thinking about the Y shapes that make up the tree and the tilts within that Y shape. So very often using the side brush gives you a mark that you just could not paint otherwise. And yeah, I go with that until I exhaust the idea. Now, I did miss a bit of yellow, so I'm picking up a bit of yellow. And again, when this happens, it does happen quite a lot with me. I will suddenly think, oh, I needed a bit more yellow there. You don't sort of panic about it. You just reintroduce the yellow where you feel you need it and carry on. So these are the lights. Believe it or not, these are our light tones. Even these, what look like darks at the moment, because they're comparatively darker than these lights, they're still in the light values. But I've separated it from the background to the foreground and the middle ground, which is where our activity really is happening. You can see I'm being, I've let that action zone have a little bit of a rest for now. But now is the time, once you've got that action zone completed in the first wash, this area is now not quite complete. I've got some lights. It just so happens that in the area of the middle ground where the weeds meet the shack, there is almost like emerald greens. So how do you make those? Well, that's sap green, which again, if you don't have sap green, you can use yellow ochre and viridian. And I would just add a small amount of blue. And you'll get this sort of more of a luminosity to the green in the shadow. It's a lighter tone at the moment, so don't worry. It might look dark, it's possible, against the white, but later, this area here, and it looks messy, and it's deliberate because it is messy, it's weeds. But the only point of note really is you'll notice it's a slightly cooler green than that one. That's a slightly warmer green than this one. And that's all really we need for the to and fro of the eye on that. Now, I'm going to be putting ivies climbing up. So even at this stage, I'm putting it in. I might add a bit more yellow to the one on the right, just to give it a variation. Slightly warmer than that one. Hardly notice it, but I did put some in. But now I really must focus on the lights in the shack. Good. So I'll give you a moment to get there. In the meantime, just to keep mine alive, and if you're waiting because you're already there, just give it a light spraying with your atomizer. It's not going to hurt. It's the first wash. It just keeps everything lively. Okay, so there's my greens in the first wash. Second wash, well, that will come after I've finished the first wash on the roof. So the first wash on the roof, this is, as I mentioned, going to be, there's going to be white here. I'm going to reserve the paper. But even at this stage, I can start to nominate the darker lines of those lines on the roof. And I'm going to do that, interestingly enough, with a bit of yellow, a little bit of orange. So there it is, a colour. And I just draw a little bit of that orangey. I clean my brush a little bit better. Because what happens is when you've got very bright light on a very light roof, sometimes the shadows have colour, have a little bit of colour in them. So they've always got tone within them. But this time I'm just putting a bit of yellow and orange on those darks. So I'm actually just drawing those lines with a bit of colour. And what I'm hoping to achieve is at the end of the painting, I will have a prismatic note. So I even put a bit of this orangey tone. It's usually orange or burnt sienna. As the light sort of slips from white light into the colors, like even with a rainbow's a good example of this. You see the prismatic effect, but even on a white roof, you'll start to see, look, just here and there, some of the leaf shapes that are shadowy on the roof in the light. They have a sort of orangey, even pink. You could add pink because it's that point of the prism that we're seeing. This is where the color is refracting, and you see a little bit of pinks, orange, yellows. And so I'm playing with that because I am a watercolorist after all, and that's my area of fun. I like those tones, but very quickly I have to give way to the cooler colors because it does. And those cooler colors are lavender purples. So how do we get that? Well, I use cerulean blue. So there's cerulean blue. I'll add permanent rose or alizarin crimson, but I'll get this purpley grey tone and I'll play with either a bluish purple lavender or a pinkish purple lavender, you see? So I split them prismatically and in the middle, it's purple lavender. So the first wash I'm going to put in is all going to be very thin, like tea, and it's just going to be lavender. And I'm going to put that through. Remember the roof shape? I had two circular shapes, but this time I'm using sang fui, this oriental idea of the side brush. I jokingly call it maestro grip, where you hold the brush like this. You see that? And it's unifying my shadowy shape on the roof. And I'm going to let those two little shapes come together and then join in to the green, because there is a tree here. Now, of course, when I'm ordinarily painting and not demonstrating, what I would do is I would just marry these colors together as I paint. It wouldn't be like a pause. It would happen in one go. But even now, while this color is taking its form, I can add some of the pink. Remember I said I've got a pinkish feeling there, so I'll put that in, a little bit of pink. And if anywhere where I see the pink in the photograph, I'll put it. But if I see cooler areas, I can pick up the blue lavender, which is more cerulean, and I can put that, say, down here, where it gets a bit cooler, perhaps. And have fun playing with those slight temperature differences that you're seeing there. Be careful that you don't overwhelm the roof. We need to keep the lights, but have a bit of fun with the pinks and the blues here and there. Good. And we just let that do its thing. It's going to just take a moment or two to get where it wants to go. In the meantime, we can be painting our first wash in the shadow area. And for that, well, I'm going to use my neutral tint, or you could use Payne's Grey or black or whatever you want to use. Doesn't matter, as long as it's dark. And mix it down to a tea thickness, like so. And I'm just going to wash that in to all of this area. And this time I'm not really going to be using any of my clever moves. It's just a very boring, flat wash. Nothing extraordinary about it. And I just bring that all together, trying my best to unify the shadow area in the shack. And you'll notice at this point that even though it's what we call a dark color, because it's neutral tint, it's not too dark on the paper. It's a light middle value, okay? If it's going well. If it's going too dark, then quickly with your paper towel, take some of it off, because we don't need it to be too dark. But if you're happy there, that's good. Now, while it's wet, this is where you can have a lot of fun. So just as I did with that roof, remember I went from purple to pink and blue, sort of like a pendulum on a clock. I'm going to do the same with the grey. I'm going to go from a cool grey to a warm grey. And I'm immediately thinking about, where do I see cool areas? So the cool areas tend to be where the light's hitting it, funnily enough, the sky blue. So I'll add a little bit of cerulean to my grey. Here we go. And I'm just going to push a little bit of that blue on that open door. I'll also allow a little bit around the window frame here. And maybe just a bit here and there on these wooden laths, as they sort of, you know, they're sort of nailed on one line after another. And I'll just put a little bit here and there. Okay, not a lot, but a little bit. And then I'm going to think about, where are the warm elements in the grey area? Okay, and you'll see there's browns up here. You might even see some pinks over here, or even some orange notes. So this is the warm element. So to respond to that, I would pick up a little bit of orange into my grey, and perhaps put a little bit of orange tone there. Maybe a little bit of orange tone over here. You'll notice the orange is absorbed into the black, and it won't be an orange anymore. It'll be sort of a orangey grey. But once you've got it into its place, then you can pick up some raw or burnt umber, or a bit of both. It doesn't really matter. And again, I'm keeping it thin. This time I want to be going into my towards a middle value, so from light middle value to a middle value, but I don't want to overwhelm my painting with this tone. So I'm looking at this brown and I'm thinking, I can see it's there, definitely brown here. So I'll paint that into the grey. A little bit up here as well, for sure. Trying to keep some of my ivy alive, because that's growing up. And I've painted into its area. So what do? If you paint into an area, you just use a piece of towel just to lift it out again. I can go back in later with a bit of green. And then as I come downwards, I'm starting to think, well, I've probably exhausted all of the obvious brown notes. Maybe it's starting to go towards a lighter grey here and there. So I've got to be careful. So what I like to do is have a little bit of fun with violet. Now, violet and brown are very interesting colours because they're very close on the spectrum. So brown is violet with yellow. Aha. So if I add violet into my brown, I will definitely change the feeling of the brown. It still will be a brown though, you'll see, but it will have a different kind of accent. And as I start to push this color in, I'm thinking about putting some tones for the door, the wood on the door, maybe over here. I'm using the brush in different ways now because I don't want to just use it in one way. I'm also thinking about the tip of the brush to perhaps draw some lines. And that's got that purpley brown note, which, as you can see, it has a different feeling to it. It's kind of warm, but a different kind of warmth. it's got a pink within it, which is lovely. So if I bring this over here now, I'm going to start to think about painting this side of the cabin. And I'm leaving some of the grey to show through. How much do I leave and how much do I paint over? Well, this is where you really kind of have to focus on the depth that you're seeing within your photograph, the resource. And I just think that I'm gradually going to bring out the feeling of the windows. So I paint around them, first of all, and I use quick marks. Haha, this is different to the texture, but it is involved with texture. So if I paint quickly, what happens is I kind of print the brush mark, but very quickly. It doesn't have time to make a dark mark on my paper. It will make a mark, but it's not as dark as if I was to take my time and slowly draw the line. Now, there is times when I will want to slowly draw that line, definitely. But now I'm just putting, you see, watch what I'll do. It's almost like Zen. You have to really kind of think about it. So I'm going to do the curtain within that window. Got that purpley brown note on my brush. And I'm thinking about the curve of that. I believe there's a sort of a cloth curtain type thing. It's grey. It's the same color as the shack, but it's hanging down. It's got a bit of a curve. So I quickly, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking I'm going to make a curve. And I quickly respond to that with a sharp mark like this. See? And that was it. And then I'll go back the other way to put a bit of a shadow tone underneath it. This is very much close now to thinking about when we're thinking about speed of a brushstroke, we're talking about Sumier painting, really. This is more of an oriental aspect, and watercolor in its development is basically linked to Chinese calligraphy in history. It's coming from that that culture. We have modern brushes, of course, and different pigments now. We're not using ink, but it has that sort of lineage. So studying Sumier painting, I have to say, will help your watercolors. So let's just look at this again. Now I've put this side of the building with a bit of tone. I've changed some of the marks. They're quick. I'm now going to go the other way on top. I'm going to draw around the frame. Quick. You see that? Very quick. And then across. Now this does take time to develop this kind of quick approach. And it's not without problems, because sometimes what will happen is you'll paint the wrong place. So that's why I said have a piece of paper towel in your hand, because then you can lift. Okay, so now I have my second wash here. I have my second wash up there. I can, of course, go around some of the frames. Now you can do it quick or slow, doesn't really matter, as long as you paint with a thin line in this wash. And what that will do is it will rescue a little bit of your drawing, which is always nice, but it will also give you a better feeling of where this painting is going to. And what does a better feeling do for us? It gives us confidence. Confidence is, I would like to say that confidence is one of the big factors that separates the intermediates from the advanced, because the intermediate usually knows as much as the advanced person, but something holds them back. Then just have a lacking their confidence, say, "Oh, I can't do it," for whatever reason. But they can do it. They do it, and they do great paintings. Whereas the confident artist who kind of knows the process, that's the thing. We've been doing the process together now for months. So we know that we're going to go gradually darker. There's no rush, apart from these Sumier marks I'm bringing you into. But as long as you know where your stages are with the wash, you can see that this is now developing beautifully. It's going to work. So that gives you the confidence to know. But at this stage, the lights, remember this is still light, so now I'm painting into an area which will go dark, but at the moment this is light. In watercolor, lights are the magic to the whole process. This is the element of the painting that we as artists should never rush. This is the area of the painting where we should be enjoying most what is about to happen, because we are like the farmer who's planting the crop. We're going to reap the rewards later. These are the seeds that are going to produce, I don't know, this wonderful effect. But for now, do you see what I'm doing? I'm using this brown that I've used into some of the shadowy tones in the weed groups. Now I'm using quick marks. You see that? Little brush marks left, brush marks right, little shapes here and there. Sometimes I'll take the paper towel and I'll mop some of it up so it's lighter. And sometimes I will do this to the brush to create little extra textures, which you could never do otherwise, or if you did, it would take forever. And then I move on to the next place where I can start to see textures. And I always have a bit of fun developing these marks. This is your mark making vocabulary. Brush marks. This is like your signature in painting. This is the bit, you know, where Picasso was telling us about. We train all our lives to paint with the abandon of a child, but we also bring in that Zen idea of, I know what this mark will look like, kind of. I know how to use the brush going this way, that way, and this way, just like a plant grows. So a plant is like our hand. It will grow upwards to the light, and it will face the east, and it'll face the west. And at the top, it's going to be facing, you know, the sky. So we need to make our groups of plants have that dynamic. You know, let this go to the left, let this go upwards, let that go to the right. Some of it's going to, like these vines, they're going to go over the top like a rainbow. They're arcing, they're looking for light. And so we need to try to foster all of this understanding into our painting. And that's what will give us a naturalistic effect. It's not going to happen by chance, very unlikely, but it can look like it happened by chance if we know how to craft these marks. And I think the longer you've been on the planet looking, the more ability you can have in this area, because these are things which, as an artist, we develop through looking and seeing and experiencing in a lifetime. And that's kind of why, as much as Picasso really wanted to be better than Matisse, Matisse had in the end, Picasso said, in the end, there is only Matisse, because Matisse had all of this life experience. Same with Monet. Monet didn't really, and I think this is an amazing thing about Monet. The Monet that we know and love didn't really start to happen till the last part of his life. I mean, when he was a younger artist, he was definitely trying. But he, as Manet said, you know, he felt he was a fraud because he was kind of not delivering the artwork until he got, and then when he got older, of course, it all slotted into place. Manet was upset because his name was similar, and even in French, Manet and Monet are very similar. So people were getting them both confused, which really upset Manet, who felt he was a far more significant artist. And yet, we know how history pans out sometimes. In the end, perhaps Monet was the more significant artist. So yeah, bring everything that you know about nature into your painting and let it sway the way you're painting. Now I see in these textures here, while I'm still in the lights, I am still in the lights, I see some like little splashes of golden light on the leaf. So for that, I pick up my brush and I hold the tip like really at the end, almost like it's balancing, and then I tap the brush with my finger like this. You see what it does? It causes splatters. You got to be careful with this, especially if you're in your front room. You don't want to get this on your carpet or anything. But if you do this carefully, you know, like I'm probably 2 inches above that group, I can, not only can I just flick it down, boom, like that, and I get a sprinkle of color, I can also flick it by holding it there and allowing a little bit of a like bow and arrow effect, you know, where you flick that way. I can flick this away and I can create a cascade of color that can go upwards. And that's a really good technique for punctuating the lights with what can seem like chaos or random, but actually you saw what I did. I located it where I wanted it. So there was nothing accidental there. It's a planned maneuver. And yeah, we're nearly there. We're nearly through the lights. So there's my light middle value. I've had a bit of fun. Hope you have too, because it's going to get better, honestly. We're going to go now into the middle values. This is where the painting starts to pull together more. Am I ready for it? Well, I could probably hang around a bit longer, but I'm not going to. This is a demo, so we're going to move on. Okay, so middle values next. Now, the good news is we have pretty much the same song sheet in color for the next value map. So we just go back into our wells and increase the thickness. That's all we need to do. And then we make the statement more bold here and there. Okay, so I'm going to start again in the background. I'm going to put the middle value there. Now, if you look on the value map, which is above to the left, you'll see that it doesn't get much darker than middle values. So we will pretty much finish the background with this wash. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to mix our green. So the green is sap green. This time I'm going sort of milky thickness, a bit stronger. I'm going to add a bit of neutral tint, but not a lot, just a small amount. Oh, I think that was purple, but doesn't matter. Do the same thing, just darken that green a little bit. And just for the benefit of keeping my painting alive, I'm going to now spray that area again. So, did you see that? Very light misting, not a lot at all. So here goes. So I'm going to now come into this area And I'm using that brush technique again. Remember, it's very good for painting organic textures. And I can pat the brush as well. You see that? And really bring things with a bit more energy into what I always kind of describe these as sort of staccato shapes because they're sharp. You know, you've got maybe pine trees or whatever these happen to be. And I'm quite quick, but what I'm hoping I'm illustrating here is I'm going upwards and creating little networks of Y shapes. And I might even do a little bit of the sang fui. So this is the sang fui. Remember I was saying about keeping the side of my brush, letting that dictate the textures, but my energy is in the gesture. And where does that gesture come from? Well, it comes really from my knowledge of trees. That's where it's going to come from for you. And it's going to come from the years that you spent looking, seeing, and enjoying, you know, being outdoors. I'd have to say that, you know, people who live in the country probably are a little bit more aware of these sort of things than maybe those who live in the city. But those who live in the city might be equally blessed then when it comes to painting things like buildings. So, you know, it's all there for the taking. It's just about being in the right place to see things and studying. Now I'm picking up a bit of grey as well because the neutral tint will do a good job in the next values, which are grey up here in this tree. So I'm going to just put, and be careful with neutral tint. It's a terrible color for trying to paint carefully because it can go dark so quick. So mix it to that middle value. It's kind of in a middle value, it's milky thickness, but with neutral tint being so strong these days, they've really packed punch into that color. I would probably go back down to coffee really because it's well known for going out of control. And I put a little bit of that color onto the roof because I'm going to lead into my roof next because I'm getting to a point where I'm almost exhausting my options. And that's good because it means it's time to move along. Put those little branches in, they're okay. And then I'm going to soften a few things here and there. Just by cleaning my brush, drying my brush, and just tapping on some of those lines just to push them back, if anything else. I will go darker on that later, but for now, it doesn't need to be. You know, we capture this gradually. We don't want to lose. It's like a fisherman, you know, fishing. Don't snatch at the fish. Take your time. It'll come. You'll get it. You'll get your reward if you take your time. It's patience. And in a way, there's no need to rush. We're watercolorists. That's what we do. This is our job. This is how we get our fun, believe it or not. So when we're in each band of the wash process, we should enjoy it. And now I'm going from light middle value into middle values. I'm thinking about now I'm going to augment these tones into my roof tones. I could put a bit more orange up here actually. So let's go back to the orange. This is a bit thicker. This is a stronger orange now. And I'm going to put a little bit more orange up there. Wow, I like that. I forgot to put a stronger yellow green up there. I can do that now as well. So where's my green? It's here. And put some yellow into it. And you see what I'm saying? Each element gradually gets a bit stronger. But eventually I have to move on. And it's good because now I'm ready to move on to the roof. Now the roof, as I was saying before, we look at the value map, the lines are light middle value. So it's this tone, but between the lines is a middle value and it's purples. So we go back to purple again. Here's our purple, lavender color. Now, is it that purple? Not really. It's a more blue purple, lavender. So I add a bit more blue. Oh, that's better. This is looking good. It's more promising. Now I want a mixture which is sort of strong coffee, I would say, not quite milky because this middle value is a light middle, but it's just stronger than that light middle value. So it's between, on my value strip here, it's normally a middle value, but I think it's just a fraction lighter, but it's not as light as that. So, and it's tricky because it's on a roof. So that's why I'm hesitant to say go milky thickness because that could be too thick. But I'm just trying that color there. It looks very strong, I know. Don't worry. It should look just a bit darker. But my struggle is to get the color I want. And I really want it to have that lavender tone. And then when I've got the lavender tone, that's better. I feel that this is connecting better. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm leaving that, reserving that space for that line. I really want to capture the feeling of the line. And this is where it's going to be fun, but also exciting because it's difficult at times. Now, I will be meandering from that lavender color to a blue lavender to a pink lavender, because I think in that method, I'm going to have a more exciting finish. Do you see how that pink just makes this roof feel better? And then when you've got too much pink, then add the blue to the lavender on the other side. And then you cool that note. And so suddenly my painting goes from what would probably be, to some people, a very straightforward roof. It now has more je ne sais quoi, as the French would say. It has more interest. And you see the broken bits. I'm playing with those. Not quite sure how I'm going to really get those yet, but I'm working on it. And this is the other thing about watercolor. We don't necessarily want to come into a watercolor knowing everything, else we wouldn't be bothered to paint it. We do want some little surprises for ourselves. And I thin the paint a little bit, add a little bit more blue as I come out towards the sky, because the sky is going to lighten the roof tones a little bit. But I'm going to speed up now. I think you got the idea. I've waffled on quite a bit there, but the idea is like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take care of the edge quality. Now, this is the next more important aspect once you've got that idea. So what's the edge quality all about? Well, the edge quality is, in a nutshell, we are seeing light going through a tree, hitting a roof. That sounds straightforward, but the complexity is the light travels through the canopy of the tree. Uh-oh. So what does that mean? It means it's going through the leaf shapes And so sometimes leaves are like 5 leaves deep, sometimes it's 1 leaf deep, and sometimes it's like 30 leaves deep. So you get this sort of speckled, dappled effect. So that's the next element where I start to dapple the edge and make that edge a bit more exciting, I guess, with some leaf. Sometimes it's like leaf shapes. That's all you need. But sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, perhaps. It becomes broken edged. So you sort of soften with your brush. So what did I do? I cleaned my brush, squeeze it in the towel, and then I just soften some of those edges. Now this bit is going to be the fun in the painting. It only lasts for a brief moment, but while we're there, enjoy it, because once you've got this dappled effect happening and you've got your lines, remember, and even if you messed up a few lines, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I've messed up a few of them. Oh well. But now I'm ready to bring these purple shadow tones, that's what they are, into the tree around. You see that? I put a few up there as well. And I'll bring some of this down below into my shack, just a little bit. Those purple tones. I'll even let them come down into the greens down here. Why not? That'll be fun. Not everywhere. I keep some of the lights that I've kept from the start. I want to keep those. But if I paint over, I can lift out anyway. And I'm now ready to move from my roof to the shadow area of the building. So that's good. So I've got a purple effect on my roof. That's quite nice. And it's now ready, I think, to move on. Right, so well done if you've managed that so far. Don't worry if you're still on it and it's not looking or feeling as good as you'd like. That's life. Sometimes it's going to rally at the end, you'll see. This is the halfway point of the painting. And as I said, it's a very exciting part of the painting, but it can also be the part of the painting where, when we're beginners or intermediates, we think, oh my gosh, it looks rubbish. What have I do? Wasting my time. Don't feel like that. That is natural because we're not even finished. We're halfway finished. And the painting itself is still happening. So please don't give up yet. Carry on. Now, right at the edge of the shack, there's a line on the roof. And here I'm going to pick up my grey again with a bit of blue. So it's a grey blue. And I'm just going to point an edge with this bluish note on that there. Do you see that? That's important. And along the bottom as well. A little bit. And I'll do the same on the, even though I've got a bit of a light edge there, here and there, that's good. I will put a bit of this blue note around the edge of that as well. Anywhere else where I might see that? I've got a feeling I could put it here. Just there. And there. So this is it's like a glaze really, but I'm just adding a bit more texture. Now each time I put in a glaze, I'm adding more depth. So I'm putting those lines in again with this same bluish tone, but it's very thin. The lines are getting thinner now. I hope you see that. And they're not getting any stronger really yet. They will do. Just creating textures. I'm just creating the distressed feeling that this building has found itself within. And it's going to happen gradually. So add a little bit more blue, grey here and there, and maybe even add a bit of pink into it as well. A bit more pink here and there. Because there's a lot of colour in this building. And yeah, it's suspended between greys. And it reminds me of when I was at college, before I went to university, in England, you have a 2 years at college learning the fundamentals, drawing, etc., colour mixing. And I remember one of my tutors who was a hippie from the Woodstock era. He was a lovely man, wore his Jesus sandals and smoked pipes and things. And he took us out once, well, quite a few times, but he took us out one time and he said, look at the colours between the slab stones. And I looked and I thought, I know he's not mad. I mean, he does look a bit mad, but he's not mad. There's got to be colour here. And he said, do you see it, boy? And I wanted to say, yeah, but I didn't. I couldn't see it. And I said, what colour is it? He said, well, you've got to look. And this is what he meant. The colours between the grey that you can see or not see. Some people are more colour sensitive and they'll see it. And some people will develop that colour sensitivity through looking. So I spent probably the next couple of weeks looking at the pavement, the grey pavement, the tarmac, trying to find cracks and the colours between it. And in the end, years later, I know what he was talking about. It didn't happen then. And that was the important message. He was telling me to look for it. And that's was probably the greatest lesson he taught me. Other than that, he was very often outside smoking his pipe. But what a good lesson to learn. So I'm now trying to use pinks, blues, because you can separate it really into cools and warm. That's what I learned from the French masters. It becomes a cool, warm dynamic. And that, I think, is really what he was talking about, the colours between the greys. So have a look, see if you can summons them out of there. You may not necessarily, but you can if you gradually look for it. If you see it, brilliant, put it in because you've got the gift already. I'm going to cheat and show you one. I'm going to make one right now. Do you see the window here, the haunted window? It's black, right? Black against that grey. Well, it doesn't have to be. We can summons Mr. Berry, that was his name. Good name, isn't it, Mr. Berry? Take some red and paint red squares, 4 of them, where you're going to put the black. Just like that. And you see how I've just abstractly created this 4 squares like so. And then I'm going to drop some crimson into it just for fun. A bit of crimson. And just I'm going to let it do its thing. Now I know it looks ridiculous. So I've got this going on up there, but now I'm going to take some orange and I'm going to put some orange in the, you know, this little hayloft thing here, up here. There it goes. And I know what you're thinking. Well, it isn't orange, John. Why is he doing that? Again, hopefully it's going to reveal itself. I'm laying in a color that the black can sit into, and maybe it's the color between the grays. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you can create it. While I've still got this orange and red, I'm going to go back into these weeds. Yeah, the weeds get another hit. So it's all fun for the weeds too. So they're going to get a little bit of what thickness is this? It's now milky thickness, a little bit here and there, smaller amounts. Did you notice? It's getting smaller. And then from here, it's going to turn towards grays. So I can pick up my gray again, neutral tint. And I'm going to start to let that happen. Maybe a little bit of purple in there. If it gets too much for you, what you do is just soften them with your brush. But we're creating textures, so that's the main thing. And it's starting to happen. Right, now I am going to definitely go back in now. This color is starting to dry. It's not dry yet, and I'm going to pick up my neutral tint. I'm going to drop it in to that orange. Wow, look at that. Who knew? So what's happening is if you can't see it, don't worry. It'll start to happen for you as you do it. The black pushes the orange outwards and we get this glow of orange around the edge. I'm going to do the same in the windows. They're probably a little bit too wet still, but maybe I can speed it up. Just dry it a bit. What I want to do is I want to bring depth with paint and color into these windows. Now, of course, I could have just painted it a flat black shape, and many artists do, and it works perfectly fine for them and anyone else. But here's an opportunity to let the color resound, and you may not even see it until you're close up, and then you'll go, oh, it's not just a black shape. There's some like red or something in there, or orange. But look at the depth I've now achieved. It's probably a bit soon for that, but anyway, it was a bit of fun. I'm still going to put my middle values all around the inside edge of this. Now, I'm going to use more gray, a little bit of brown, not a lot of brown. Here's my burnt. This is definitely milky thickness. You see it's darker. And where I have got the shadowy edge inside the eaves, you can paint pretty much towards that line, that grey-blue line you've created. But allow some of the color to come out into the lights or the lighter tones in the shadows. These are, by the way, it's bounce lights we're seeing, but they're still fun. And look what's happening. It's just giving my painting that je ne sais quoi. Plus also, I'm getting more depth. And notice, if you may, that I'm not painting just like, it's not like I'm sawing wood with a brush. I'm deliberate and I playfully shape those tones. Sometimes it works. Sometimes I have to say when I do it, it's like, oh, well, I tried that, but I'll go back in and I'll play a bit more. And then it works. But you have to kind of risk a little bit here and there. Here's another trick that I like to do. Splay the brush so it's got those fuzzy textures again, and then use it to create a sharp edge. And that just sort of defies logic in a way, but it creates a dynamic with the brush that creates a texture that there's no way I could do otherwise. So it's all happening, but it's little by little. It's very much a case of being playful, exploring what the brush can do. That's a given. But also try and be a little bit more inventful with how you're doing it, because Yeah, we can all paint like we're sawing wood. That's not a very good analogy, I know, but sometimes if we've been painting in a particular way for a very long time, it can become a challenge to break out of it. So this is the challenge. The challenge is, can you supply a different way of using your brush that, yeah, it just might turn you into a new way of thinking. Now, I just put a bit of burnt sienna, that's a warm orange brown, into that grey mix because now I'd like to put a bit more colour. So that's, you can see burnt sienna has an orange note or a red note in the brown. So if I push that in there, I get a bit more of that because I see a bit of orange there. So as well as being playful with my brush, I'm also still thinking in these middle values, can I see colour? And if I can, what is it? Is it a warm or a cool? That's the first question. And then invariably, it's going to be, if it's a warm, what kind of brown is it? Is it that one or is it that one? Is it a burnt sienna or is it a burnt or a raw sienna? Or is it a burnt umber or a raw umber? These are the questions. And then if I can't identify, it's not one of those usual ones, then it's likely it's close to a purple. So it's a purple with brown. Sometimes it can be that simple. And it is in this case because there's a lot of purple in the brown. So where does that come from? Well, as I said, the theory is if you add yellow to purple, let's just try it. I'll show you right now. So there's clean that out. That's purple. Can't really see it, but there you can. Purple, add yellow, brown. There it is. There's what we're after. And it's bursting out between the greys. The greys are just holding it all together, but there's this sort of squeeze of color every now and then. It just oozes out. And you see here, there's sort of blues in the grey. So this brings me back to grey. So what is grey? Well, grey is black, but lighter. So there's neutral tint, which is as black as you can get. Can I make that color with any other color? There it is down there. It's black. Well, yeah, as I said, grey, it will ooze out either blue or brown. It's warm or cool. So let's just take a brown. This is burnt umber. Let's take a blue. This is, it's probably cobalt. No, it's French ultramarine blue. Put the two together and look, black. So the blue and the brown are between the greys. Do you see what I mean? And that's what we're finding in this building. That's what the secret is. So if there's any secret. So now I'm taking my neutral tint, going underneath that roof eaves there, and I'm going to bring out some of the greys towards those brown tones. See how I'm using quick marks because I don't want it to linger and get too big. So I'm now putting my darker middle values in. And this is how it happens. Just a painting can just start to develop. While I'm doing these darker middle values, there's a darker middle value in the curtain, on the window edge, on the window sill, on the planks between the windows. Isn't it fun? And this is the thing about painting. It's just like you know, a process where as long as you get the timing correct, which I'm not saying I have because I've chumped it too much, but you're starting to see things come together. Now, there is other things you can do. Now you notice it's now starting to look like that tone doesn't belong with that tone. So then you clean your brush, squeeze the brush so it's damp, and look, see that? I join them together. And this is technically it's a glaze. So you can actually not only lift color with a brush, a clean brush, but you can join them together. You can kind of weld the colors together. And notice now this area is starting to feel more formed. It's got a bit more to go yet, but I'll go a little bit darker here, and then I'm going to add some darker greens down here. You know, in these shadowy greens down there. Let's just take some, this is phthalo green, into that grey. And now I'm going to start to put some dark greens. Ooh, aren't they delicious? Now that's the thing about greens in the shadows. If you use the right green, a phthalo green, suddenly it becomes part of this shadow tone. And I'm going to put a few down here as well. And sometimes what I do is I pat with my finger as well on those sort of textures, because they can be, by the time you've done your, this is like third layer, isn't it? Third or fourth layer. By the time you've got to 3 or 4 layers, the same brush mark, because I've been using the same brush, haven't I? Can look a bit boring. So as I come up, you see I'm doing the ivy now, going up the wall. Got the lights, or some of them. Lost a few on the other side, unfortunately, but that's life. And then I just pat it with my finger, and then I get something else, a different texture. So I would encourage you to, and sometimes I sort of draw with my finger as well. It's like I'm going, you know, maybe it's as if I was using my finger as a brush. That's what I'm doing. And there's lots of watercolorists do that. They'll even use their nail. Now I don't really have nails. But if you do, you can scratch with your nail and pull color into, you know, in and out of the painting. So that's fun. So there's some other areas that you can explore. But look at my hut now. It's starting to come to life. It's not there yet. I know it's got more to go. This is the fun thing though. I'm almost there. Almost. What does it also need? Well, now I've got this dark green. Remember, I did say I probably won't do another value up here, but I will do over here. I'm going to put some dark green here and there on top of the roof, because did you see I put a bit of it on that shadowy bit there as well? Because there is an overhanging, well, there's a feeling of a tree overhanging the roof a little bit. So I'm going to let that happen. And already that's doing what I wanted it to do. It's pushing this forward. But up here, I definitely need a bit more tone. Do you see it? It's got to get darker. And if we look at the value map, that's the only bit that's really much darker. So I take the same color. It is a phthalo green with neutral tint. And it's just a dark green, gray. And really what it's doing is it's just pushing the frame of the roof out. And you see how I just put a bit of that color along the roof line just to push it out. And it's looking splendid now. It's starting to come to life, and hope yours is too. And be playful. Use those colors as values. That's really very important. But maybe just as important, which I've not really stated too often, is the textures. Create textures, start to be inventive, and it's coming together beautifully now. Right, so we are really very close now to the end. We just need our dark accent. So before I put the dark accent in, one more thing I forgot to say. Now I've got that lavender color, which is a purple. I want to put that into and around my lathies, if that's the right way of saying it. These little broken bits in the roof. And then I'm going to put the darks into that. And then the dark accent, really, now I've pretty much used up all of it at the moment, pretty much, except for the dark accent. Now the dark accent, just put a few bits of brown here and there into the greens. The dark accent is the darkest value that you're seeing. I can see there's some here in this corner for whatever reason. We need to go darker in that little loft, darker in the eaves coming down. That needs a dark accent. Anywhere else? Oh yeah, and of course in these broken tiles areas here, and a little bit on this wall maybe, and of course these 4 windows, which I think mine are now drying pretty well. If I zoom in, hopefully you'll see the red. Get it going. You can just about, it's not going much further than that, unfortunately. Oh, it is. So you can kind of pretty much perceive some red in there, and I can go darker, so that can go darker. And I'm just going to use neutral tint. That's it. You could use black, Payne's grey. I'm just using a tone. And at this point, I'm using tone. Get the thing to focus. Here we go. So this is neutral tint, creamy thickness, pretty much as it comes from the, your palette now. And I'm going to, I will give it a little bit of a spray actually, because I've been chatting again. Just to so that when this actual color starts to take, it can have a little bit of a soft edge. I wouldn't mind. So here we go. You'll see that gets very dark very quickly in the loft. Up in the eaves, especially this corner up here, very dark. I like how you get a bit of bounce light in there and you sort of see left and right of the wooden boards that are holding it up. And then it comes down to here and you see a little bit more of that shadow tone. That's good. I see a little bit of this tone down in this corner here. See that? Just a little bit. And then I move across. I'm going to put this color into my broken roof. Wow, that works. Suddenly I've got a broken roof. A little bit into this corner here, I do feel that there is very dark corner there, and underneath the window. A thin line of it here. You're just really now responding to the value map and where it's directing you, where you see the darkest accents. And that's it. Back into my windows. Somehow painted into the, that always happens. And when it does happen, don't worry, just clean your brush, lift out the offending bit of paint. And if you've got a fingernail, that's great. If you don't have a fingernail, you can use a palette knife. Should scrape back to light, like so. Like that. That's okay. And anything else? Yes, of course. The last place I've forgot is the little jam here, where you can see the chink in the door there. That really gives it a very abandoned feel, doesn't it? Around the edges of the door, and maybe a few planks here and there. You know, when it's nailed and the wood has been planed roughly, hewn out of a big log. So it's got this kind of meandering line, and I just use a few of these almost like ink wash lines just to nail it together, kind of thing. And then I'm there. I've got my my painting. Anything else? I think I've got it. I don't really think there's much more else to do, but it can happen that you can, if you've got your lights in the weeds like I've got now, I kind of like how they're working, but I probably want to bring a little bit more green here and there. So I'm going to just bring a bit of green. So I to and fro a little bit there, but shouldn't really. I'm playing for the sake of it because I feel now I got what I came for. But if I really wanted to push this painting a little bit further, I could glaze. Now, glazing is where you take a thin wash of grey, or any colour really, but I'm going to take grey. And I'm just going to push this area back. This area back. Join that in with this. That's all with the grey. So this area just pushes back. And I can do the same over here. Got to be careful that the paint's dry. Mine's not perfectly dry, but I'm just about going to get away with it. But if you wanted to do this later when it's dry, not a bad idea. And push that shape into that zone. And there we are. Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. It's been absolutely fun for me. Thanks so much for the wonderful time we've had in the last few months doing paintings together. Of course, I'm going to be starting my residential painting trips very shortly, so we'll have a break for a while. I do hope that you've enjoyed it enough, the experience of painting in this group, to want to come back when we resume again. Probably, you know, the autumn. We'll see. Okay, but I'll keep you up to date, and looking forward to seeing many of you in the summer anyway. Oh, last thing, did forget, this isn't as dark as the dark accent. I did say that these trees could do with a shadow tone. I'm using a small thin brush just to put an accent around those trees there. Just make sure that they do sit back. They don't pat them with a towel, a paper towel, you know, like this, just to, you don't want them coming forward. And there we are. There's my shack in the woods. And I'm going to stop the share now and see how you've done.